Emailer writes, my daughter sprained her ankle and she was told she would not be able to play hockey for 2 weeks. What could your system do for her? Could you get her back quicker than 2 weeks, or how would you address that problem?
Well, traditionally our sprained ankles last about 2 days, and the difference is we do not adhere to the philosophy of rest, ice compression, and elevation. That's a 200-year-old therapy, and if you sprained your ankle 200 years ago, you're going to have exactly the same result as you have today. And we said last week not too many people drive a 200-year-old car, but we still do 200-year-old therapy. What we would do, quite frankly, is, again, and ankle sprains are insidious. I did a survey with the NFL, and we identified that we identified 60, I think it was 60 players that had ankle sprains, and we followed them through their career if they lasted more than 2 years. And every single one of those athletes who had an ankle sprain within 6 months had a major muscle-related problem. And what I was trying to say is to the NFL is that it's a direct correlation to the ankle sprain. When we address an ankle sprain, we address the symptom. We address the swelling, the ecchymosis, the pain, et cetera, et cetera. We do not address, A, why it happened, and B, what happened because of it. There's 2 places in the human body where muscles do not go across the top of a joint to protect the joint. One is called the sacrum and ilium. That's the main weight-bearing up by your hip. And the other one is the tibia fibula, which is the main weight-bearing on your lower body. It holds your leg together. There's only a tiny ligament that holds that together. So when you sprain an ankle, you shift that weight onto that ligament stretches. When it stretches, it creates an electrical short. When that electrical short happens, the muscles now no longer get the appropriate electrical signal. So every time you take a step, all that force now that should have been absorbed by your calf or your quad or your hamstring starts traveling right on up the tree into your hip, your lower back, and sometimes even your shoulder. So what we do is we identify where the muscle failed. We get rid of the electrical origin of that problem, and then we look at the neurological side of it as well as the physiological side of it. To make a long story short, she'd be skating in about 3 days.
Amazing. Here's one I think a lot of listeners, an email that a lot of our listeners could relate to. It's from Mike in Champlin. He says, I play softball with my mid-40s buddies, and I have 2 days of back pain afterward. Is there anything that I can do, or is there anything that I shouldn't be doing, or should I just quit?
Oh, well, definitely don't quit. The goal is that to have a active lifestyle. Anyone who has an active lifestyle has a higher quality of life. And our job at the clinic is to allow you to have any active lifestyle that you want without pain. The goal of our clinic is move freely without pain. The reason he's having pain, obviously, is, again, the nervous system isn't turning on the muscles fast enough. So when they fatigue, they concentrically contract. So they bunch up. They kind of like get a mini cramp. And that hurts, and it's stiff, and you're sore. If he was to come to the clinic in approximately, a minute and a half, we could have that muscle completely relaxed, and he would never know he had the problem.
You put a couple of the pads right above my buttocks, for lack of a better term, and you were able to get me to turn a golf turn that was, within seconds, I was turning probably almost twice as far as I was prior to you giving me the treatment.
Oh, absolutely. And keep in mind, the ARP, again, it doesn't send that electrical signal to protect. So what it's sending a signal is to relax. And every single listener that's listening to this right now, I can categorically tell you when they were 3 years old was more supple than they are right now. Now, the question is why? And the answer is when we start to mimic our environment, we start to move incorrectly. No one told a 3-year-old how to move incorrectly until they get to around 4 when they start mimicking mom and dad, and then they learn how to do it on their own. But what we can do is relax the muscle and allow it to go to its fullest eccentric elongated state, which means it's in its fullest available state to absorb force. Now, in your golf swing, as an example, I told you that just by simply doing that, and we do that with PGA pros as well as LPGA pros, all over the world. And it takes their warm-up time from 45 minutes to an hour down to about a minute and a half to 2 minutes.
In the news right now, Lance Armstrong, the, 7-time Tour de France winner, 7 straight, retired, wasn't going to do it anymore, got the itch, got back in, had an accident, broke his clavicle, and you're working with him.
We are. And again, what we're trying to do is basically speed up the blood supply. And if you speed up the blood supply and you take the force off of the joint, then the tissue will heal. And there's not a doctor in the world that will disagree with that. The problem is that when we're dealing with a fracture of any kind, we usually put a historical marker on it that it's going to be, 6 to 8 weeks. And usually a fracture is casted. In Lance's case, is basically we got hardware in there, and the hardware is holding the bone together. The bottom line is the muscle's job is to hold the bone, and the muscle's job is to absorb the force coming into the bone. So what we do is accelerate the blood supply going into the non-union or the fracture, and then we take the force out of that area, and the tissue will heal very, very quickly. Our fractures usually, worst case, probably 3 weeks.
That's just amazing. Because what's generally the
Generally a fracture, especially a casted fracture, is anywhere from 6 to 7 weeks. Usually they'll recast, one time during that process, do another X-ray to determine. And again, we're not doing anything magical. All we're doing is speeding up the body's ability by using an external source to ramp up the blood supply, and then using that same external source, which would be the ARP, to build the muscle up to where the force goes into the muscle, not to the bone.
And you've alluded to this during the last week and this week, too, that it's not just the system doesn't just heal an injury. You use it long-term for quality of life and to prepare yourself, like you say, for stretching, to get ready to participate in sports.
Oh, absolutely. Once an injury is resolved, we probably have 500 NFL players right now that will tell you they wouldn't even dream of playing football without using our system. And the reason for that is that we've increased their ability to absorb force by tenfold. It takes a minute to a minute and a half a day to do it. And what guy or gal isn't going to spend a minute to a minute and a half a day to extend their athletic career, their earning potential, and their performance? It's just a matter of a lot of guys want to keep it to themselves because they want to have the competitive advantage.
Can you do some name dropping?
Yeah, we can do quite a bit of name dropping if you'd like.
If you want to drop a name or two and let people know some of the folks. Well, we know Brett Hedican, for instance. We know Lance Armstrong.
Right.
You mentioned last week Tommy Harris of the Bears.
Tommy Harris of the Bears. We have 9 Bears. We have 9 guys on the Bears organization that have our technology and use our technology and our system. We have approximately 17 guys on the Colts. We have probably 21 guys on the Arizona Cardinals. We had 7 on the Steelers.
Probably why the Cardinals won. They had more people on.
Well, they should have won.
They should have won.
They should have won, but they didn't. We have kind of a saying: "He who has the most ARPs wins." But in that case, it didn't follow.
Well, they probably had a few too many Pro Bowlers on defense. That's probably what happened with Pittsburgh.
Yeah, it was good. We have, like I said, about 500 NFL players. We have about 250 NBA players. We have probably 250, 260 Major League Baseball. We have 2 of the largest soccer clubs in the world, AC Milan and Team AC Fiorentina. As in the soccer world, we have swimmers. My partner right now, Jay Schroeder, is in Miami with 2 of the top tennis players, Bethany Maddock and Nadia Petrova. They'll be there all weekend for the tournament there. And, PGA pros. We got Bruce Vaughn coming in on Monday to the clinic. So, we have quite a few.
And the common man, Dan Cole.
And the common man, Dan Cole.
Amateur player extraordinaire. Okay, just amateur player, and a heavy emphasis on the amateur. Dennis, thanks again. We'll let people know that arpwave.com. It's that simple. They can get all the information they want on your website there, arpwave.com. Questions for next week's show or shows following that, send your questions to booth@kfan.com. That's booth@kfan.com or common@kfan.com. Send us those emails. We'll talk to you again next week. Dennis, thank you very much.
Thank you, Dan.
That's House of Pain for this Sunday. You have a great weekend. We'll talk to you next week at 7 o'clock. House of Pain, ARP Wave Clinic, right here on The Fan.